Hi, my name is Megan Manny, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my behavior assessment project from this semester. So the target student for the focus of this behavior assessment project is Scott. He is a 17-year-old male from South River High School. His ethnicity is Hispanic Latino. Scott's disability is classified as specific learning disability on his IEP. Since Scott is in high school, I was able to observe him in his history class. There are many strengths that I noticed that Scott has. He is a friendly student who is polite and kind. He works successfully and is motivated when he works one-on-one with the teacher. He is at grade level comprehension for history as well as in his other classes, as noted by his IEP. He is creative and enjoys learning about topics of his interest. Scott is able to demonstrate his understanding of topics and ideas through discussions. Some of the challenges that I noticed that Scott faces include his struggle in working independently and asking for help when he needs it. He lacks adequate participation in active classwork, homework, and group discussion. Scott doesn't advocate for himself when he doesn't understand, and he struggles with handing in completed homework consistently. I also noticed that he struggled maintaining focus on assignments and doesn't take advantage of extra time that is given to him, as well as extra opportunities for support. He is motivated by taking frequent but short breaks, and he enjoys content that is related to his interests. So, a little overview about the target and replacement behaviors. The target behavior that I noticed was Scott's distractions that enable diversion from his work, which I defined as sitting in silence and not completing his classwork promptly, and does not raise his hand for assistance from teachers. Scott's distractions are additionally seen through his communication with peers and not completing his work promptly because of it. Scott also uses his phone during class time and leaves the classroom for a duration of time in which he is unable to complete his classwork. So the replacement behavior that I generated for this intervention was that Scott will complete all his classwork and schoolwork in the time allotted, given the combination of additional time if needed, and participate in classroom discussions and activities. So here's an overview of the behavior plan I generated. The behavior plan that was created and implemented for Scott to learn and demonstrate the replacement behavior was comprised of 5 intervention strategies. The first intervention was to stop Scott from using his cell phone in class through the creation of a cell phone jail. This is where students placed their cell phones on a bin on the teacher's desk when they were found using their phones inappropriately in class. The second intervention was the use of preferential seating to stop Scott from talking to his peers during classwork time. Scott was seated at the front of the classroom by the teacher's desk, and he was sat next to an exemplary student who modeled appropriate behavior. The third intervention was a replacement behavior that teaches Scott to raise his hand and to ask for help when he does not understand the work, and to be able to use class time efficiently this way. The fourth intervention was to increase Scott's preparedness for class by allowing him to keep a material station in the classroom so that he was always prepared and had materials to complete his work daily. Finally, the fifth intervention creates a daily benchmark for Scott to complete 75% of his classwork before he was allowed to leave to use the bathroom, unless it was an emergency. That helped Scott to diminish his desire to escape the classroom when he didn't want to complete his classwork. The image shown is the material station that was previously mentioned. This material station was kept in the classroom with Scott's name on it, although I got rid of it so it's not visible for this presentation. But this was filled with all the materials that Scott needed daily for class. In the beginning of class, Scott would access his personal material station to increase his preparedness for class. This helped quell his behavior of searching for pens and paper to use to complete his do now, which he would usually take time out of the day, out of the class period, to do that. And it helped to increase prompt completion of classwork. This graph of the data collected during the intervention shows the effectiveness of the implementation of the intervention over the course of 9 days. Scott's baseline target behavior presented as disruption was measured at a rate of 66%, and noncompliance was measured at a rate of 50%. After introducing the replacement behavior, disruption was measured at a rate of 50%, and noncompliance was measured at a rate of 50%. After the intervention of replacement behaviors, Scott's disruption was measured at a rate of 30%, and his noncompliance was measured at a rate of 21%. Therefore, the intervention was successful. According to the data, Scott demonstrated a 36% decrease in disruptive behavior from the baseline to post-intervention, and a 29% decrease in noncompliance. So finally, to evaluate and analyze the intervention, I noticed that the intervention was effective and successful in reducing Scott's target behavior and increasing the replacement behavior, as shown by the graph in the previous slide. The determination of the function of Scott's behavior through the use of the ABC chart was effective in helping me to create an intervention that was specifically tailored to changing Scott's behavior long term. This targeted intervention implemented skills for Scott to learn and practice over time to increase the repetition of the replacement behaviors. Through each specific intervention implemented in the classroom, such as a station of materials for daily preparedness, preferential seating in the front of the class next to an exemplary student, and the benchmark of 75% completion of classwork before Scott was able to leave the classroom for the bathroom, Scott was taught and able to practice the replacement behavior of participation and on-task behavior. So for suggestions for future use of this intervention, I would maintain the interventions put in place with, I believe that would exponentially help Scott in class based on the success of the intervention over the span of 9 days. Scott particularly benefited from the use of preferential seating, which helped him to keep focus and quiet during class time, as well as viewing the model behavior from the exemplary student he sat next to. The maintenance of the cell phone jail was really beneficial to quell Scott's inappropriate use of his cell phone in class. The class as a whole also benefited from this use. For future implementation, the use of a cell phone jail can be applied as a Tier 1 support for all students from the beginning of the school year and can be carried out throughout the year. For Scott's class assignments and tasks, the implementation of assuring that 75% of the work was completed before Scott was allowed to use the bathroom should be maintained. Over time, the amount of work that Scott must complete before he is allowed to leave the classroom should be gradually increased. This gradual increase of completion of classwork is suggested to reach 80%, then to 85%, then to 90%, until Scott's desire to leave the classroom to escape work tasks diminishes, and bathroom breaks are used appropriately and sporadically. Finally, it's suggested that the distribution of extra credit points as motivation and positive reinforcement for on-task behavior decreases as Scott increases the desired behavior in the completion of his classroom. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you learned a little bit about my behavior assessment plan.